In my grandfather's garden there was a fine old hedge of yew, of considerable length, which was clipped and trimmed till it made quite a wall of verdure. Behind it was a wide grass wall, which looked upon the fields. The grass was kept mown, so as to make pleasant walking. Here, ever since the old Puritanic chapel was built, godly divines had walked, and prayed, and meditated. My grandfather was wont to use it as his study. Up and down it he would walk, when preparing his sermons, and always on Sabbath days, when it was fair, he had half an hour there before preaching. To me, it seemed to be a perfect paradise, and being forbidden to stay there when grandfather was meditating, I viewed it with no small degree of awe. I love to think of the green and quiet walk at this moment. But I was once shocked and even horrified by hearing a farming man remark concerning this sanctum sanctorum. It'd grow a many more Tartars if it were ploughed up. What cared he for holy memories? What were meditation and contemplation to him? Is it not the chief end of man to grow potatoes and eat them? Such, on a larger scale, would be an unconverted man's estimate of joys so elevated and refined as those of heaven. Alphonse Karr tells the story of a servant man who asked his master to be allowed to leave his cottage and sleep over the stable. What was the matter with his cottage? Why, sir, the nightingales all around the cottage make such a jug, jug, jug at night that I cannot bear them. A man with a musical ear would be charmed with a nightingale's song, but here was a man without a musical soul who found the sweetest notes a nuisance. This is a feeble image of the incapacity of unregenerate man for the enjoyments of the world to come, and as he is incapable of enjoying them, so is he incapable of longing for them. While my grandfather was preacher at the meeting house, Mr. Hopkins was rector at the church. They preached the same gospel, and without surrendering their principles, were great friends. The Bible Society held its meetings alternately in connection with the church and the meeting house. At times, the leading resident went to church in the morning and to chapel in the afternoon. When I was a boy, I have on Monday gone to the Squire's to tea with Mr. Hopkins and my grandfather. The glory of that tea party was that we four, the three old gentlemen and the little boy, all ate sugared bread and butter together for a treat. The sugar was very brown, but the young boy was very pleased, and the old boys were merry also. Yes, Stambourne had its choice pleasures. It is pleasant to read of the harmony between these two men of God. They increased in mutual esteem as they increased in years. As Mr. Hopkins had more of the meat, and Mr. Spurgeon more of the mouths, the rector did not forget to help his friend in divers quiet ways, such as a £5 note for a sick daughter to go to the seaside, and presents of comforts in illness. On one occasion, it is said that, having a joint of beef on the rectory table, the clergyman cut it in halves and sent his man on horseback with one half of it to the independent parsonage while it was yet hot. A kind of joke not often practised between established and dissenting ministers. In the front of the house, towards the left, nearly hidden by a shrub, is a very important window, for it let light into the room wherein were the oven, the mangle, and best of all, the kneading trough. How often have I gone to that kneading trough, for it had a little shelf in it, and there would be placed something for the child, a bit of pastry, which was called by me, according to its size, a pig or a rabbit, which had little ears and two currants for eyes, was carefully placed in that sacred shrine, like the manna in the ark. Dear grandmother, how much you labored to spoil that child, yet your memory is more dear to him than that of wiser folks who did not spoil the child. Do you now look down from your mansion above upon your petted grandson? Do you feel as if he would have been better if you had been sour and hard? Not a bit of it. Aunt Anne, who had a finger in it all, would spoil the child again if she had a chance. I have put in such an approach to a portrait of my grandmother as I could find. It was taken by some travelling artist who visited the district and took off several of the family. The dairy at the back of the house was by no means a bad place for a cheesecake or a drink of cool milk. It makes one think of the hymn, I have been there, and still would go. The cupboard under the stairs, where they kept the sand for the floors, would be a real old curiosity shop nowadays. But there it was, and great was the use of it to the cottagers around. There was a sitting room at the back of the house, where the family met for meals. That, which looks like a blank side in our picture, there certainly was a window looking out upon the garden. Perhaps it was a little further back than the picture goes. A very pleasant outlook there was from that window down the green garden paths and over the hedge into the road. When I last saw the keeping room, a bit of ivy had forced its way through the lath and plaster, and had been trained along the inside of the room. But in my childish days we were not so verdant. I remember a mark on the paper which had been made by the finger of one of my uncles, so they told me, when one year the flour was so bad that it turned into a paste or pudding inside the loaf, and could not be properly made into bread. History has before this been learned from handwritings on the wall. The times of the old Napoleon Wars and of the Corn Laws must often have brought straightness of bread into the household, and a failure in the yield of the little farm made itself felt in the family. There was a mysterious jack over the fireplace, and with that fireplace itself I was very familiar, for candles were never used extravagantly in grandfather's house, and if anyone went out of the room and took the candle with him, it was just a little darker, not very much, and if one wished to read, the firelight was the only resort. There were mould candles now and then in the best room, but that was only on the very high days and holidays. My opinion, derived from personal observation, was that all everyday candles were made of rushes and tallow.